in this video we'll learn a few things about Beethoven's Symphony No.3, aka the Eroica Symphony. So this symphony has very well-known and fun behind the story which is Beethoven, when he first started to compose this piece, he intended to dedicate it to Napoleon of France because Beethoven supported the idea of French Revolution. But when Beethoven heard about the news that Napoleon crowned himself and declared himself as an emperor, Beethoven got really upset and he furiously scratched off Napoleon's name on top of his score. So that's a very fun behind the story that's associated with this. And besides that fun story, this piece is historically very significant. And in order to understand that, we need to learn about this document called the Heiligenstadt Testament. So in 1802, Beethoven took a break from his Vienna career. I mean, he was still there, but he took a vacation from Vienna and he moved to this little town outskirts of Vienna called Heiligenstadt. And the primary reason for that was to be away from the city sound in Vienna and to see if that helps with his hearing loss. But at the end of the stay, he realized that his hearing loss is something that he just has to deal with for lifelong. And he writes a letter to his brothers. And later it is called Heiligenstadt Testament because that letter is very significant. But it's just a letter after all. In this letter, Beethoven publicly acknowledges his hearing loss for the first time, and he expresses how he's been struggling with suicidal thoughts and how this situation brought him depression and how frustrated and disappointed he had been about the situation and his hearing loss and all that. But at the end, he also expresses his determination to make the best out of the situation and produce the best art that he can despite of all these obstacles. And another very important turn that he takes from this moment is his career switch from being a star virtuoso pianist to a devoted composer. So Beethoven actually, he was trained to become a virtuoso pianist from a young age. So when he first moved to Vienna, he was more of a star pianist rather than a celebrated composer. But from this moment, he decided to be a composer rather than a pianist, which is very logical because in order to be a good pianist, you need to be very sensitive to the sound that you produce. Whereas in order to be a good composer, you have to have the ability to hear the music internally, so with the hearing loss, it's probably a logical career move to switch from being a pianist to a composer. So that happened. But this symphony is the first symphony that he produced after this letter, after writing this letter. And historically, this marks as the beginning of Beethoven's middle period, which is actually Beethoven's prime period. So Beethoven's middle period is characterized by the heroic, powerful, aggressive, and somewhat, anger-inspired sound that we typically associate with Beethoven's music. And this was the beginning of that Beethoven sound, and the name of this piece is Eroica, the heroic symphony, so it's perfect. And this also means that this piece marks as the beginning of Romantic era, because in music history we regard Beethoven's middle period as the opening of the Romantic era. So historically, very, very significant. Musically, the opening of this symphony is very distinctive and very innovative. So traditionally, symphonies opened up with a slow introduction before the main melody, the main theme was introduced. So so slow introduction was kind of expected form of symphony, but Beethoven starts this symphony with 2 chords in forte with accents like bum, bum, and the main melody ba da 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 comes in. So I mean, at the time it was probably very surprising and very innovative to the audience to, you know, hear it, because they would have been just like relaxing, you know, in their seats, expecting some slow, you know, progression, and then all of a sudden this, you know, sound bursts and symphony starts. So how fun is that, you know? So actually in music school, in, you know, if you're a music student in college, they would have it's very common to have question in music history exam that they just play these 2 chords, bum, bum, and then they ask you who's the composer, what's the, you know, name of the piece, so what's the historical background, blah blah blah. But these 2 chords are so important and so unique in music history that like we all know, you know. So yeah, anyways, that's a fun thing about this piece musically. Another thing is Beethoven actually elevates the status of lower strings to almost equal to melodic strings in this piece. So starting with the concept of basso continuo, lower strings typically play the role of accompaniment for the melodic instruments in the ensemble situation, rather than a melodic act as a melodic instrument. But he actually starts the first movement, the main theme, with a cello. So he introduces da 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 da, the melody with the cello, and in the 4th movement, the lower string is also featured significantly. So so he elevates the role of lower strings in the symphony, and ever since this symphony, Beethoven utilizes lower strings as a melodic instruments. And the 4th symphony is also very interesting because it's a theme and variation form, and the theme of the 4th symphony is actually from Beethoven's ballet Prometheus. So Beethoven himself called this movement the Prometheus variation. So that's another interesting fact. Another thing is the length of the symphony. So typically before this symphony, the length of symphony would be like 20 to 25 minutes, but this one, the first movement itself is almost 20 minutes, and overall, depending on the tempo of second movement, it could go to like 45 to like 52, 53 minutes, you know. So that was a huge innovation as well. So I hope you listen to this piece today because it's important and beautiful and fun. And by listening to this piece, I hope you'll be inspired and encouraged to go beyond your limit and make a change in the world and in your life. And I'll see you in the next video.